Hello, Bears fans. Welcome back to another edition of Bears on Tap. It's another Tuesday episode. It's just two of us here today, though. I am making my return to the show. I'm Ron Luce, and the mainstay, the face of Bears on Tap nowadays, Mr. Quentin Crisco. Q, how are you doing, buddy? Before we get into anything football, because it might not get better from here. So that's why I want to ask how you're doing now.
I knew I shouldn't have let him drag me back in. I knew I shouldn't have believed it. I shouldn't have got that feeling again of like, I'm in this now. I'm in it again. I was out and they dragged me back in and now I'm here.
I feel that.
I'm doing okay.
I feel that, man. Hey, I think we all were after that Thursday night game against Washington. Everybody was like, oh, son of a bitch, maybe this team is okay. Maybe this team is good.
Yeah.
And then they came out and did what they did on Sunday. And we're gonna get to it. But I feel you, man. They've dragged us back in only to try and hurt us. Because as I put my little name tag here, I'm already numb to Bears pain. It's been a lot of years of getting used to it. So it's a little hard for them to hurt me at this point. But Q, a lot to talk about on the docket today, not only obviously from the Minnesota game, obviously a very interesting game coming up this weekend with the Raiders coming to town as well, a game I will be at, so be sure to be following Bears on Tap on the old X app. You'll see all the crazy shenanigans from the morning and then clips, hopefully, that are good clips is what we're hoping from within the stadium, but we'll see about that. But Q, let's get into the elephant in the room here, and that is Justin Fields. Justin Fields hurt in Sunday's game. He left with a hand injury on his throwing hand that now has been reported as a dislocated thumb. At this point, according to Matt Eberflus, it is all about grip strength for him. So until he can really confidently grip a football, he's not going to be starting for the Chicago Bears. So for the foreseeable future, it will be the Tyson Bagent show from what we at least expect. And we'll get to that here a little more later. But Q, the timeline right now, 4 to 12 weeks potentially for Justin Fields. I mean, where do they go? What is the game plan now? Because this injury kind of throws a monkey wrench into everything that would have been the 2023 season.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, where can you go? I mean, you're going to find out what you got in Tyson Bagent, which is, I mean, at least that's kind of a nice side. You can actually know going into next year if this guy is worthy of being a backup or not in the league. But outside of that, I mean, there's not a whole lot of upside to it. You're kind of just like sitting there like, what do you do with Justin now? I mean, at this point, you're probably looking at a top pick and you're really gunning for the top one for that kid out of USC or the North Carolina kid that people seem to think might be closer to Williams than everyone wants to say. But you're looking at the prospect of starting over again at the position, which is always hurts, but that's where you are. I mean, and maybe Fields gets back and just tear in 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and just tears the league apart. But I'm at the point where I'm believing what I've seen with him, and that's a guy who is extremely talented. The highs are extremely high. But when it's not high, it's almost always low. And it's almost always like you can't find answers. And some of that's on the coaching. Some of that's on the O-line. Some of it's on whatever else you want to put it on. I thought the O-line had played pretty well so far this year up until Sunday. But and even Sunday, PFF had him graded pretty well. I think there were a few individuals and a few coaching decisions that were kind of like along the O-line that really kind of tanked the game from a blocking standpoint. But generally, some of the, like Tyree Carter looked good. I thought Darnell Wright had one of his better games in pass protection of the year. But some of the calls were just very bizarre. Like the line calls, the line adjustments were just very odd. But not to get off on an O-line tangent. On the Fields front, I mean, it's hard for me to envision him being here next year at this point, personally. I mean, it's just, if you're going to be looking at a new coach, you're going to be looking at a new GM potentially, and he's going to be in the last year of his contract. and you have to say within a year under new coaching, maybe new management, we need to commit to this guy now, and we're still not sure about him unless he just goes off next. That's just a major if you end up with one of those top 2 picks. Like, that is, anyone coming into the Bears job would prefer a clean slate to betting on the final year of Justin Fields' rookie contract. And I think that's just logic at this point.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm there with you, right? I think the injury really hurts Justin's chances of kind of convincing, even maybe a next regime, hey, hang on to me, I'm worth it, right? Because the best ability is availability. And if you're not on the field for, again, if this thumb takes longer, because we've seen time and time again where there's an optimistic timeline for an injury and it doesn't work out that way. And I'm not just saying with the Bears, I'm saying league wide in general, right? We've seen it over our lifetimes. So there's a very good chance that, rather, like you said, than that 4 or 5 window, which would be ideal, I think, for most Bears fans, we could be looking closer to 8, 9 weeks potentially on that longer end. And now all of a sudden that puts you, past Thanksgiving at this point. So
Yeah.
not a lot of football left then down the stretch there to really, like you said, right, kind of solidify a place here, next year. And quite frankly, I'll be honest here, I think Justin Fields needs the change of scenery, because we've just seen what this Bears regime has been for the last 2 years and how toxic it's been. And we got some numbers that are going to back that up here in a little bit. But I'm right there with you, man. I don't think he's unfortunately a Bear next year. And the injury timeline certainly puts a damper on anything that could have changed that.
Yeah, like, I think to the point about, like, you think he can go someplace else and maybe hit that reset button and be able to succeed. Like, I still believe that if you build an offense for Fields, and when I say this, I have a specific team in mind. I'll tell you at the end here, but like, if you build a power run offense with deep shots off play action all over it, and like the Tennessee Titans Ryan Tannehill offense, that is like, when Fields came out, I said, I was sitting there thinking, like, what's the floor here? Like, we know he can throw deep accurately. We know he can run. Like, it's got, like, Ryan Tannehill feels like this guy cannot be worse than Ryan Tannehill. And Tannehill, he really struggled in Miami his first 4 years. Got to Tennessee with a power run game with a King Henry, next to him, and like, they were just able to start lighting up scoreboards with that. It's a little limited in what, in the playoffs. Once you get to those, like, gotta win moments, it's not exactly what the upside that you want at the quarterback position. But like, you look at the guy who was running that Tannehill offense for a few years, Arthur Smith, the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Like, I think the Falcons make a lot of sense for him and could really do well by him, because I do think his ceiling is higher than Tannehill still. But I think that, at the least, you can create a Tannehill, Tennessee Titans type offense around him and expect him to do well.
And I think it would be crazy thinking, just quickly about that Atlanta idea here, because you look at what Desmond Ritter's done so far this year with Atlanta. I mean, they've had a pretty strong start to the season. They're not blowing people away by any means in the NFC South, but it's kind of become a 2-horse race, it feels like right now, between them and Tampa to probably take the division ultimately. And they're, like you said, they're doing it with 2 very clear top backs in Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson. They're doing it with more Jonnu Smith than Kyle Pitts, which is weird, but that's neither here nor there. And you have a Drake London. Yeah, and you have a Drake London there who, is your lead guy on the outside. I think if they add maybe one weapon in the receiving game, and then to your point, Q, I mean, he's a Georgia boy. He's from the Atlanta area. That feels like it could be a match made in heaven, and a good change of scenery for him. And speaking of that, what would potential Justin Fields' trade value be? And it might be too soon, obviously. The injury derails that. He's probably not getting traded anytime in the near future. This is an off-season topic, but too soon evaluations here, Q, for what the trade value is for Justin Fields. Because, mind you, a season ago when the Bears had the number 1 pick before they traded it and people were yelling from the rooftops for them to take either Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. It was reportedly a first round pick for Justin Fields at times, whether it was the Jets or some of these other teams. Probably not the same case anymore. What do you think his value realistically is to come this offseason if the Bears do decide to move on?
Yeah, I think you're really most likely looking at so the baseline here has to be probably the most recent trade of a QB on a rookie contract that you can find, which is Trey Lance, right? So
Yep.
Trey Lance got a 4th round pick, probably a late 4th because it was Dallas Cowboys. So sitting there saying, I don't think anyone's going to give a first for him. I mean, I think that if he had, continued to play well, that's when you were talking first round territory, potentially to someone who's a late first rounder. But at the end of the day, you're talking about a QB who is on 1 year left on his deal, going to need to be paid in a year. Like, you need to make that decision. You need to remember there's no middle tier QB contracts. And that really limits the upside to paying him long term before he's proven anything. So that's just gonna hamper your trade return value. So at that point, I'm thinking probably mid 3rd to late 2nd. Like, obviously where it lands is going to depend on the team that wants him. If it is Atlanta, if Atlanta makes the playoffs, late 2nd, or maybe 3rd and a 4th or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You start talking late 3rd and a late 4th. But I think that to hope for a 2nd, I think would be optimistic. To hope for anything in the top 50 might be unrealistic, is kind of where my thought process is sitting.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think the higher end is like a 3rd round pick, like you said, probably mid to late 3rd round pick is probably the best you get back for Fields at this point. And again, just it's not even necessarily a talent thing. There might be a team that sees that and says, we absolutely can make him a successful quarterback in the NFL, but they're not going to overpay for a guy that the Bears are probably just going to be trying to get rid of. They can probably play the game and say, hey, we'll give you, a 5th or a 4th. And then maybe if there is that negotiation or other teams get involved, okay, maybe we'll give you a 3rd. But nobody's probably overpaying more than a 3rd for Fields. So I'll have to agree with you there.
If you want to pull on some heartstrings a little and some wallet a little, Arthur Blank, Justin Fields would be very good for Arthur Blank. Georgia kid, grew up a Falcons fan, idolizing Mike Vick. There's a lot of reasons for him to end up in Atlanta that are outside of football, that are just good for attendance, jersey sales, whatever, general team sales. The Atlanta fan base would be very excited for him, which would be good for their team.
Yeah. Well said. And again, to your point, systematically, it really does feel like that makes sense, right? And things are in their court there. On the topic of trades, we have a comment here from a friend of the program, Scott from Iowa. He says, he is still in the camp of trading the number 1 pick for a boatload of picks. And really, I think it just comes down to where this team lands at the end of the season. Because right now, there's a realistic chance the Bears have 1 and 2 in this draft. I mean, it's starting to look really good right now that they are going to get that just because of what Carolina has done so far. They obviously are on bye this week. Now turning the offensive play calling duties over to OC Thomas Brown. So it's not going to be Frank Reich anymore calling the plays after their horrendous start. The Bears are right behind them. So even if the Bears do start to put some games together or Carolina does the same, realistically, both of these picks are probably in the top 7. And that's probably worst case scenario, Q, if you ask me.
I think 7 is that's the range that you're really you feel comfortable saying, right? You feel comfortable saying these will be top 7 picks, the both of them. But personally, I understand the sentiment behind saying if we get 1, trade it and stick with Fields, but just the resetting of the timeline, resetting of getting a quarterback who hasn't been potentially scarred by the dysfunction that the organization has given him. I mean, I am a firm believer that the Bears organization has failed Justin Fields more than Justin Fields has failed the Bears organization. But
1000%.
that doesn't change the fact that I think it's done here. And it's just, I'm not sure there's going to be growth for him as a quarterback here anymore.
And I think to your point, right, about the Bears failing Fields more than the other way around, I think it's just fair to Fields at this point to give him that clean slate, fresh scenery, send him somewhere where he can potentially be very successful. I mean, we saw it with a guy like Geno Smith, for example, right? Goes to Seattle. That's a very quarterback friendly offense. And he's been able to resurrect his career and has been a good starting quarterback. I'm not saying he's, elite by any means, but he's been good. That team is able to win games with Geno Smith at quarterback. There are teams around the league that can win with that style of QB play. Seattle was obviously one of them for a long time, especially with Russ there. You mentioned we've already talked at nauseum about Atlanta. That feels like a place where he can realistically fit.
And to
Q.
be clear, if this was last year's draft, my tone might be a little different, but there wasn't a quarterback in last year's draft that's the pedigree of prospect of Caleb Williams or Drake May. Like CJ Stroud has been amazing. No one saw him on that tier of prospect that these two guys are.
Yep, agreed. And I would even argue that some of the other guys, like a Michael Penix, for example, even Michael Penix, you could probably make the argument in this past draft would have been one of the top two quarterbacks coming out. And in this draft, he's probably 3 or 4 realistically
Yeah,
in
probably
terms of the
Shadur, I
rankings.
think, would be third. Shadur Sanders out of Colorado, but yeah, and then and there's Penix, and then there's Quinn Ewers out of Texas. Like scouts are going to be drooling over Ewers' release. Like it is just
Oh yeah.
lightning. It is like Drew Brees type speed that he gets that, or probably even like I hate to say Dan Marino, but like that's the fastest I can think of, and he's not Dan Marino. Don't get me wrong, but his release, you don't find that often. He just whips the ball out with a flick of the wrist, and scouts will be adoring that.
Yeah, and he'll inevitably fire up draft boards when the time comes. So, again, very deep quarterback class, and I think when the Bears are going to be in a position, it could potentially be a whole new regime. We'll see. With that all in mind, you'll probably want to hang on to those picks. Speaking of trading, Q, we'll move away from the Fields conversation here a little bit. Before we get into topics of the game that we have coming up here on our little agenda, but a couple other guys on this roster that are due for some contracts. They've already gotten rid of one of them. Chase Claypool, gone. He's in Miami now. He's not an issue for the Bears when it comes to trying to re-sign or anything of that nature. However, there is another receiver, Darnell Mooney, who needs a new contract after this year, and your top corner, Jalen Johnson, needing a new contract after this year. Do the Bears pay them? Do we even get to a point where Ryan Poles or anybody else in that front office actually gets a chance to extend them in the offseason? Or are they gone before that can happen? If the opportunity presents itself, Q, what do you think the trade value for these two players could be for the Bears if they really decide to hit the reset button and blow it up?
Yeah, I think it's a good question because it's like, how do you set the trade value on these players, right? Because again, you are trading a player who is under contract for 11 more games right now. Like that's it. That's all it's guaranteed. And especially in a guy like Mooney's case, a guy who hasn't produced for I don't think any reason of his own, but hasn't produced over the last, what do you want to say, 23 games, like you'd expected after being a 1,000-yard receiver 2 years ago. So I think that on the Mooney front, that makes that more difficult. Like, and what also makes it difficult negotiation wise is the fact that the Bears are going to be needing to sign so many free agents this offseason that they're not going to be in line for comp picks. So there is not the argument of, well, we'll just let him walk and get a 4th-round comp pick for him, because you're not going to get that comp pick because you need to sign so many free agents of your own that the calculation will cancel it out. So the Bears don't have that going for them, which weakens their negotiations. But I still think right around comp pick, like compensation of a 4th or probably like a 4th-round pick for Mooney, maybe a 5th with conditions. I would say, a fifth that can become a fourth
Sure.
or something along those lines for someone who's really desperate for receiver help. But I mean, I guess I think a conditional fifth from a team like Kansas City would make sense. But the thing that's weird with wide receiver is it's just not that valuable for to come in mid-season, learn a new offense, and be a difference maker. So that's what also makes me question, like, man, maybe it's a sixth with a fifth condition, with a condition to become a fifth, because it's just like there's so much to get these guys up to speed, and you need to be sure you're a playoff contender to make it valuable, right? To make it
Right.
matter, because otherwise this guy might be hitting stride week 17 and it's not going to matter. Now at corner, I think it's a little different. I think the value is a little stronger at corner, despite some more injury concerns with Jalen. But
Agreed.
I think you're looking at more of a solid fourth that can become a third, maybe, or something along those lines for a man coverage heavy system.
Mhm.
Because if you're just asking him to go across from the guy and play man coverage, we know Jalen can do that.
Oh, yeah.
We've seen it. He's feisty out there. He's good at it. And there's not a lot of chemistry that he needs with the safeties, with the other corners in a man heavy scheme to really be sitting there saying, like, I need to know when the safety's coming up over the top and I'm releasing back down to the flat, or like that chemistry matters a lot in zone heavier coverages.
Mhm.
Or if it's just like a quarters coverage where it's like you have quarter of the field back, that's your lane. He's played in that. Like, he has played in so many different concepts here in Chicago. He's very scheme diverse. It's just the chemistry aspect that I'd worry about if I'm a team that's asking for a lot of reads, a lot of checks, a lot of teamwork in the coverages, as opposed to some other teams like maybe the Browns we saw Sunday run man coverage like all game against San Francisco, that, and I don't think the
Yep.
Browns have a need, but like a team that runs their defense more like that
Mhm.
makes more sense to me because they're just asking them to be on an island.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your point, it's something that Jalen has done a lot of. So I agree. I think ultimately, I think it just is the way because of what you said. Like defensive players have more value at the trade deadline because it's easier for them to come in and be immediate impact players. Even in a lot of cases, I think running back on an offense is probably a lot easier to jump in than, say, a receiver, a tight end, even an offensive lineman potentially because of that chemistry aspect that's required. You can kind of jump in and be a little more impactful, I think, as a running back on offense. But agreed. I think the value is unfortunately low for both of them, but Jalen will probably bring back more potentially. Again, if the Bears decide to go that route, there is no guarantee they're going to be selling at the trade deadline, but being 1-5 certainly it feels like it's a good enough little nudge to at least consider the
Yeah.
idea going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
So
1-5 without a prospect of comp picks, like, it's just kind of the smart thing to do at that point.
yeah, 100%
And
load
then
up.
you get to see more Terrell Smith. You get to see more Tyler Scott. Like, you get more to evaluate with these young players that you have as well.
True. Absolutely. Good point. And unfortunately for a guy like Terrell Smith, he's going to miss a couple of weeks because of mono, which is all kinds of gross, but he'll be back and be fine after 3 to 4 weeks. But to your point, right? More Tyreek Stevenson, more Terrell Smith, more of these youngsters that are going to be pieces for the future. Even maybe seeing more Kyler Gordon in different situations. Maybe he plays a little bit of outside and nickel, and maybe it's kind of all over the place. So you get a kind of a good feel for what kind of player he'll be going forward. Q, pivoting the conversation here a little bit. We've talked about value, we've talked about the Fields injury, but we got to talk about some things that are coming up as well. And one of those is, as we mentioned, Tyson Bagent. Probably going to be the starting quarterback on Sunday when the Raiders come to town. This could be a battle of rookies, by the way, for those that haven't seen that yet. It could be Aiden O'Connell versus Tyson Bagent instead of Justin Fields and Jimmy
Is
Garoppolo.
is Brian Hoyer still going to be starting, or is it
Well, they said
AOC?
it could be either one. The Raiders don't even know yet
Okay.
because they said
Okay.
Jimmy G hasn't been totally ruled out yet, but I don't think he's going to play. So it's realistically going to be either Brian Hoyer or Aiden O'Connell, but it could be a battle of
Well,
rookies if
correction.
O'Connell starts.
The man's name is actually Axel Hoyer.
Axel Hoyer?
Yes, his first name is Axel. He is Axel. He has two middle. It's like Axel John Brian Hoyer or something like that. I don't think John's right. I forget what the first. It's like Axel something Brian Hoyer,
That's wild.
and he chooses to go by Brian, which is just insane to
Hilarious.
me. I don't understand it, and I don't really care to. I just want to call him Axel Hoyer. Axel
Axel
Hoyer the
Hoyer.
Destroyer is one of the greatest names I've ever heard.
That would be incredible. That would be absolutely incredible. And it would be really funny, especially with a black jersey on for the Raiders too.
Yeah,
Like it fits. It
that's
fits
a
the player.
Raiders quarterback, man. Axel Hoyer the Destroyer. That is the
Oh yeah.
Raiders quarterback right there.
Yeah, you got fans printing t-shirts, Hoyer the Destroyer, and they're painting their face war paint. And it definitely fits the Raiders way, that's for sure, Q. But with that game coming up this Sunday for Tyson Bagent, I ask you, Q, what is a good outcome for Tyson Bagent this week? Like what is an expectation that we can sit here and say if he plays X, the outcome is considered good in our eyes?
Continuing to play on time. I think that's a big thing. That's his biggest selling point, right?
Mhm.
He plays on time, hits rhythm throws when he's supposed to, hits them at the right step in his drop when the receiver's where he's supposed to be. Now playing on time is easy if you're willing to throw interceptions because you'll just throw to a read that's not open. You'll just be like on time, boom, and then it's picked. So
Mhm.
playing on time without turnovers or while limiting turnovers. I shouldn't say without because like he's a rookie UDFA quarterback. Like there might be a turnover or two, but generally hitting open reads on time and just outside of that, I mean that's about all you can really ask for. I
Mhm.
think. I'd like to see him prove his deep arm because I mean I don't expect it to be Justin Fields deep ball. I don't expect it to be league average, but that duck that went up, it was going up against some pretty heavy winds and it created quite a narrative that he, just can't throw a football. So I'd like to see him disprove that because if that's what his deep ball looks like, you can't be a backup in this league. Like if that's what his
Absolutely.
deep ball looks like going up against 20-mile-an-hour winds, that's debatable. So like I'd
Right.
like to see him prove that up a little just for his own sake. But aside from that, I mean, I think that's what you hope to see. You hope to see a guy who you feel like belongs as an NFL backup because there's
Mhm.
still a lot of questions to be answered around that.
Yeah, and I think just to add on to that, Q, because I agree with everything that you had to say. I think it really just comes down to like it's okay to be a game manager. Like that, again, best case scenario. He's good if, like you said, he's on time. And if maybe he's because we've seen Tyson Bagent already, and albeit in a small sample size, we've seen him have confidence to make checks at the line, right? I still think back to that Indianapolis preseason game, and as soon as that corner showed blitz, he quickly checked out of it, checked to the screen, took advantage of the corner running toward the ball to then have to run away from the ball. Allow stuff like that to happen, right? Because we saw it on Sunday, the first freaking offensive play of the game. Justin Fields probably should have slid the line to his backside, to his blind side. That would have made the most sense. Instead, the line slid the opposite way. Edge rusher comes free where Fields can't see him. He takes a sack. Bada bing, bada boom. Rather than if you could see the pressure, at least you can A, either get rid of the football, or B, you can try and make an athletic play like Justin Fields can and get out of there instead of just taking a blindside sack. So again, I think if Bajent can use his brain in that aspect, because he seems like a very smart kid from what we've seen, he knows football well. In order for him to catch on, I think this quickly, you have to be a good football brain as an undrafted rookie. But ideally, like you said, he's on time. Limit the turnovers as much as possible because I don't think they'll be completely scotch free. And yeah, the seeing the deep ball be a little better. Step into your throws. He didn't step into that throw, and it's very clear on film. He just that's all arm he tries to hook it up with. Because well, in fairness, there's a freaking lineman sitting in his
Yeah.
lap, but hopefully he has a little more time. Throw it with some some step into it, and I agree with you, Q. He probably disproves a lot of people that his deep ball is better than expected. Maybe like you said, not as good as Fields probably, but still better than expected. And that will probably keep our heads from spinning. Speaking of
Yeah.
spinning, Q, I think your head was spinning, right? When watching speaking of the offensive line this
Yeah.
week. Care to elaborate on that
It's
thought?
so it's perplexing. I've gotten through Darnell Wright, Nate Davis, and Jatiri Carter. So I just go position by position. So I got through right tackle and right guard, and through the first half of center, which was all Cody Whitehair for the first half. And there are just some plays where it's like this stuff just doesn't add up. It's very bizarre. It's because like there was on the Fields interception, right, where he got where what was it, Daniil Hunter up against the running back, and or was that the one he got hurt on? No, that was the interception, I believe.
Yeah.
Daniil Hunter up against Deontay Foreman is he's just left unblocked. But what's so bizarre about it is you look like you try to find what went wrong. I can't tell you what went wrong. Like it's every lineman seems to be doing their job correctly, like based on like the logic that you would apply here. And it's just at that point, it just doesn't make sense. It's like every line. So in that specific play, the thing that is so, like that was their home run play. That was the play that they pulled out just for the Vikings. I'm convinced. They said, Vikings give us this look, we're scoring a touchdown. Because every single lineman executed very well on that play. Like they are, Cody Whitehair has his man locked up on that play. Like it is just, it's a thing of beauty until Daniil Hunter comes ripping through a running back because the guy's half his size. And it's just like, how did this happen? They started doing like, I had I was talking to Robert Schmitz earlier, and he mentioned that like because we were talking about this play, we're like, I don't get it. And it was like maybe like the coaching made a change on something, how they wanted stuff done, but it didn't get communicated to every lineman out there because it's like from that point on, it was just constant. There were just like question marks all over so many plays of the same kind of nature where it was just guys were confused why other guys were going to spots that they were. And I it had to be communication on some level between coaches and players, between players and players. What, this shift, if Cody's pointing over here and saying shift, is that 3-man shift, 4-man shift, 5-man shift, whatever, like however many you're like, everything just seemed so discombobulated that, I mean, although later in the game you get 350-pound Harrison Phillips, who put up 40 bench reps at the combine years ago, free running at the quarterback right up the middle. Like it's just like that stuff that's not acceptable NFL offensive line play. And I thought this line had played pretty valiantly to this point, all things considered, like how many backups you have playing roles. Like I thought that they had held up pretty well to this point, and it just so much didn't add up in that tape, and just still doesn't make complete sense to me. And I'm still, searching for some answers on. Like I got some explanations, I got some like most likely cases miscommunication, confusion between guys, but like it's just that can't be happening against a team that like sends 6-man blitzes that much.
Yeah, agreed wholeheartedly. And as somebody who played offensive line in my heyday, you can't allow it. It's not it was frustrating to watch in real time. And I haven't even gone back and looked at the all 22 yet. I do plan on doing it at some point here in the next 2 days because I needed to let the brain melt again before we could get back into that mess. But I'm very intrigued because to your point, in real time, it looked like a mess, and they just continued with it. I think my favorite cue, for what it's worth, was the left tackle, left guard pulled to the right side with the pitch out to the left. That one was my favorite. I don't know
Yeah.
about you, but that one made me giggle probably the most of like, what in the hell are we doing here? This makes no sense. Why send pullers away from the run? I get it if you want to
Yeah.
send like one guy away to try and be like I guess a distraction. Like mentally, that makes sense to me. If you want to try and send a puller and do kind of misdirection type stuff, but like you don't send half your line the opposite direction and throw a
Yeah.
pitch out to your running back going left. Like that's
I
just
think the
not normal.
perfect image of the confusion was like there was a play where Cody Whitehair and Jatiri Carter are not on the same page as to what
Where
they
they
need to
block
be doing.
each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where Cody Whitehair is just his eyes are over here and he's like this on Jatiri Carter, and then he looks, he's like,
What are you
"You're
doing
not,
here? Yeah.
you're not a Viking." It's just like, and I mean that's not to rip out a guy. It's just like it's to rip on the concepts that they're asking him to do. Of like, you need to make sure your players know their stuff before you ask them to do it.
Yeah, 100%. 100%, man. Feeney. Do you have thoughts on Feeney? Feeney! Feeney!
So, I mean, it's not even like I'm sitting here pounding the table to see Dan Feeney. It's just like we traded for him. We
You
can't
might as well
snap
use
the
him.
football. Like, give him a try. No one, like, none of our centers so far this year have been impressive by any means as far as just a blocker standpoint, and they both have had snapping issues. So why not try the next guy up? Like, we got him for a reason. Give him a go.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's not like he was claimed off waivers for nothing. Like you physically
Yeah.
went out and traded draft capital to get this guy. You might as well use him instead of just letting him rot on the bench, God forbid. And he's a Chicago guy. Get him in there. He's got the
Yeah.
mullet. He is Chicago O-line in like
Yeah.
in image form. Let it happen. Just let
You
it
know
happen.
how many
already.
jersey sales you'll get out of a good game from him?
I'd buy one in a heartbeat. With that mullet, I'd get a fake mullet too to put on like while wearing the jersey.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome. It'd be
Yeah.
absolutely
So
awesome.
you get at least like 10 jersey sales.
Yeah,
Totally worth it.
better than nothing. You're not getting
Yeah.
any Cody Whitehair and Lucas Patrick jersey sales. That's for damn
No.
sure.
No.
That is for damn sure. Quickly here, Q, a stat that you put together for us here: 13 starting offensive line combinations in the last 23 games, which dates back to the start of the 2022 season. You said is impressive in the most sarcastic way possible, because that is just not good, man. Not good at all.
That's an average change of more than once every other game. Your starting O line is changing. Like that's the duration of the Ryan Poles, Matt Eberflus tenure in Chicago. 13 starting O line combinations. Like that just tells me you've never had answers there. You've never had real answers along the offensive line. Like I do like some of what they've brought in. Like
Sure.
Braxton Jones, I still like. I just need his injury is going to be makes things interesting. But like I liked his play at the start of this year and last year, for the whole year last year. Darnell Wright has looked awesome. Jatiri Carter is really surprising me. But like you can't the offensive line, if you have one spot that is a weak point, it just gets rid of everything, all the good that you've done, right? None of it matters if you can't have continuity and just consistency in who's out there. That chemistry between them matters so much. And I don't think it's a coincidence that you having Jatiri Carter and Tevin Jenkins played 20 snaps this season on the field together was when you saw tons of confusion on the offensive line. Like that, having that consistency out there goes a long way, and it hasn't been there. It just hasn't, which tells me there haven't been real answers to anything or real backup plans to anything.
Yeah, incredibly well put. There's just no plan. They're just it's a nightmare. It's a mess, and it feels like that has kind of defined, as you mentioned, right? Just this Bears regime. Everything's chaos, a mess, and doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And it doesn't feel like there is a plan anymore. After I think once upon a time when we were singing the praises of, wow, we have a direction. And now it's like, wow, do we? I don't know. I don't really know. It's really gotten to that point. Q, I want to go to the comment section here for a question because I know this will tickle your fancy. Is when will the rookie D linemen start playing more? As our friend Scott from Iowa would like to know. I know they are your buddies. You're big fans, especially of Mr. Dexter.
Swerving with Jervin.
When's it going to happen, man? When are they going to start playing more?
I thought Jervin already was playing more until this. Like I haven't watched the tape of his from this game yet, but like the PFF grades were okay that I saw. Like I don't know why he only got 16 snaps after getting 30 something the week before, and playing really well. And it seemed like he was just getting better every week.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just I didn't even notice him out there on Sunday. So his 16 snaps, it's not like he was not letting them take him off the field either. But like at the same time, and Justin Jones had maybe his best game as a Bear on Sunday, but I'd still rather watch Trevon Dexter out there because that's a player to develop for the future and a player who needs reps.
Right.
Like he is new to football. He only started playing in like late high school. He's still learning the sport. And like, I think D line is a position where you can get away with that a lot more than other positions.
Agreed.
But the reps are going to matter. Like he needs to be out there. If we're not in it to win this year, we need to be in it to develop players. And that's what I want to see. Like that's once the Bears got off to their 0-4 start, I was like, I messaged the Bears group for On Tap, and I was like, I'm not going to do game previews anymore. I don't think people are that interested in this. I put way too much time into them for like the return that I think we get. So I'm going to start doing offensive line and defensive line. And the defensive line, I'm gear in on the two rookies because that's what I know is going to be here in the future and will matter that I know more about. And that's who I want to see out there. That's who I want to watch play. And I want you to start playing them at their real positions of Dexter at 1 tech and Pickens at 3 tech. Because every time Pickens is at 3 tech, it feels like every other play makes a play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then they decide to put him at the opposite spots, and it's frustrating, man. I'm right there with you. You got to see more of the youth in order to know what you have. Q, a final thought here and discussion point before we kind of start to wind things down. You asked a good question, and it is a good question. I think we have both have thoughts for this. Is this the quickest a Bears season has been officially over?
I mean, I just threw that question in there. I didn't put a ton of thought into it, but it just feels like it is. Like I don't, and I'm a lot closer to it than I was when I was a kid, you know, like, so it might feel a lot like more like, man, we still have so many games to go in this. But I mean, I don't know. When was the last time we started 0-4 or 1-5? Like 2003, maybe, when they didn't have a stadium.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, and they were playing down in Champaign at University of Illinois. Like, I feel like that team was like, that was brutal. It was like 01 was the first year I really started watching. They were great that year, so that's not in there. I don't really remember what happened in 02, which probably means they were bad, and I was a new fan, and I was like wavering on it. But 03, I watched like every game, and they were terrible, but I watched them all.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think since like even the John Fox 2015, I didn't feel this, or 2016, when it was like Jay Cutler's going to come back and they'll be fine, you know, because it was like they got off such a rough start because Jay Cutler got hurt in week 1 and couldn't keep going. And then he came back and beat the Vikings on Halloween. And it was like, okay, they might put something together here, but then he got hurt again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree with you.
Those have got to be the year 03, 04, and 2016. Those are the only years that I think have been as quick of potentially like painful and like being like, well, this is pointless to watch, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I would even argue that this is maybe worse than 16 too. Like I think this is up there with
Yeah.
like 03 territory, unfortunately. And that sucks. Because I mean, we talked about it all off season leading into this. It's like this was excitement and this was gonna be something that was, gonna be worth watching this year. And yeah, they weren't gonna be great, but like at least it was gonna be a development year. And like it has been everything but. It has
Yeah.
been brutal through 6 weeks, and it really doesn't look like it's going to get any better. Which, no offense to Tyson Bagent, but like with Tyson Bagent starting on Sunday, that kind of just indicates how this season has gone so far for the Chicago Bears.
Maybe they can sign Matt Barkley off the street.
Oh boy, oh boy, yeah. We're with that in mind. Q, a final thought I want to share because I want to preface something that you and I have we're going to embark on here as for some fun because this is how we do it here at Bears on Tap. We try to have fun no matter how bad the fucking team is. There have been a lot of quarterbacks that have started for the Chicago Bears. There's a fun little stat in case anybody didn't see it on Wednesday or on Tuesday, pardon me. If Tyson Bagent starts Sunday like we expect him to against the Raiders, he will become the Bears 29th starting quarterback since the year 2000. That's a lot. And that's
That is a
bad.
lot.
So
That's 23 or 24 years. Because you got to include the year 2000,
Yeah.
24. So
More than a quarterback per year.
Were you going to turn that into the intended starters conversation? Because I don't want to steal your thunder.
Oh no, but we certainly can. But we're going to preface this by saying that
Okay.
Q and I have a little project involving backup quarterbacks on the horizon. So be on the lookout for that and more from that. Because chime in if you've got thoughts on it. But we're going to share our thoughts and probably rank some good old
next week. It's going to be fun.
It's going to be good. That'll be on next week's show. So obviously we'll talk about what happened Sunday. We'll talk about what's going to happen the following week, for the Bears. But we're gonna get into it. But yeah, Q, let's talk about that here real quick before we do look ahead to Sunday and talk a little bit about this Raiders game coming up. The amount of intended Bears starters since 2000, like 29 is a lot. But realistically, I mean, you and I kind of talked through it pre-show. It's a short list.
Yeah. I mean, so you got Grossman, throw Orton in there because there were years after Grossman where Orton was like the entrenched starter. And then we got good old Jay Cutler, Smoking Jay. Spent like 6 years there. So as the intended starter. And then the smallest bridge you can imagine for Mike Glennon.
The worst, maybe one of the worst ones of them all, but
before Mitch Trubisky and Justin Fields. And I mean, do you throw Andy Dalton in there?
No.
You don't you? No, okay. And Nick Foles, it was never to me because he was in a battle but he didn't start the season as the starter, so he doesn't come there for me.
And he was never brought in to be the guy per se. Like he was brought in to be in the room with Mitch. Like there was never like Nick Foles is our starting quarterback, no matter what.
Yeah, and then you have to assume because Grossman was 2003, so 2002, 2001, 2000. You got 3 more starters, intended starters. So that's what
Cordell Stewart.
9. Yeah, like Cordell Stewart. So that's 9 intended starters over those 24 years.
How many of the Packers had in that lifetime? 3.
I mean, so Favre, Rodgers,
Love,
Matt Flynn, Jordan Love.
Oh, the Matt Flynn era. Well, was Matt Flynn
and
an
that kid
starter,
out of UCLA? Though? Oh no, never intended. Never intended. You're right. Just 3. Just 3 intended.
Just 3.
3 out of
and even then
5 because the UCLA kid Brett Hundley they had.
Brett Hundley. Oh yeah.
And Matt Flynn, and I think that's really.
Didn't Brett Hundley
only had 5 quarterbacks in that span?
Didn't Brett Hundley beat the Bears too?
Yeah, it was the first time the Bears were favored against the Packers in like a decade.
Gross. I remember that game. I distinctly remember that game because I remember seeing that Brett Hundley was going to start. I went, this is still going to go poorly, and sure enough, it did. So that's where we survive. That's where we survive. But Q, just like everything I think we do as Bears fans or as undercover Bears agents is what we are today. We're flying under the radar because it's a shitty world to be a Bears fan right now. We gotta move on, and we're gonna move on. Talk a little bit about this Raiders game coming up here. Again, we talked a little bit about what a good week looks like for Tyson Bagent, but I want to know, Q, do the Bears really have a chance of winning on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of their best remaining games that they have a chance in. If I'm being honest, I mean,
Fair.
Devontae Adams is not happy in Vegas right now. This team has been feistier than anyone thought. I mean, they're 3-3 right now, but like they don't have a quarterback right now that you really believe a whole lot in. I liked Aiden O'Connell coming out of school out of Purdue, but like he was what, a third, fourth round pick for a reason.
Yeah, fourth, I think.
And Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to be playing. He's been their starter. They have a good O-line, impressive O-line for what they've invested in it. Like they've found some guys out of nowhere that are actually pretty quality football players. And Michael Mayer started to look like he was coming into his own this past week. First round pick out of Notre Dame. I think he went first round.
Yeah, he was late first rounder. Or no, he was an early second rounder.
Okay. But I mean, I'm betting the under on this game because you got two unknowns at quarterback and a team in the Raiders who hasn't scored more than 21 points this season and a total of like 39. I think it's gonna be a low scoring game. I think that it's gonna be a slugfest of just like the Raiders probably win because they're 3-3 and I think they'll want it more. But I don't know. Their defense is not like they got Marcus Peters at cornerback. That was a nice ad for them because they really needed cornerback help. And I mean, he's older and he's been injured a few times the last few years, but like he's still a quality player when he's healthy.
Sure.
And they've had some guys kind of come out of nowhere at corner. Amik Robertson, he's been a good player for them. He's like 5'8", but he competes, man. I love watching him.
Guy.
Yeah. But the way where you can really attack them is the interior D line and the linebackers. I don't think they have a linebacker over 225 pounds or 230 pounds on their team. So they're basically safeties. Like their linebackers are safety size for the most part. Their edges are good. Tyree Wilson has struggled so far this year, but as a rookie, top 10 pick this year, Texas Tech, Wreckham. But Max Crosby is one of the most fun edges I've ever watched. Like he is so technically sound. His hands are so clean. He is such a good football player. I'm really interested to watch him against Darnell Wright. That's going to be a matchup that I'm really keying in on during the game.
Yes.
But it's without the quarterback, it's kind of, I expect him to use Josh Jacobs a lot. I expect the Bears to keep the ball on the ground a lot and try to get DJ Moore the football. Raiders get Devontae Adams the football. I think it's going to be a very similar game plan on each side, and it's just going to be whoever wants it more, I think, because both these teams are struggling, like as far as roster goes.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Q. I love the analysis. One thing I do want to add, you brought up, right, one of the more favorable games to the Bears in the upcoming schedule, and I can't disagree because I look at their schedule right now and I say you got the Raiders this week, then you're off to play the Chargers in LA on the 29th, then you're in New Orleans, then you're home for Carolina. Maybe that's probably the one because it's a Thursday
that's the
night
other
game.
One. Yeah, that and
but
the Cardinals if Kyler's not back.
Exactly. Other than that, though, you're at Detroit, you're at Minnesota, you got the bye. Detroit comes to Chicago. You're at Cleveland, who's like the best defense in the NFL right now, arguably, after what they did to the 49ers this past weekend. And then Atlanta and Green Bay are even better teams right now. So really, you're looking at this is one of 3 games probably on the rest of the schedule that feels winnable right now, given the current state of the Bears. So if they're going to be better than they were last year and win 4 games instead of 3, they got to get this one. This needs to be one of them. And we'll certainly see. Again, I will be there, so there will be content coming from the Bears on Tap account. Be sure to be following us there. And it's actually shaping up to be like a perfect day. It's gonna be like mid-50s and sunny. So it's a good day. It's a good day to be at Soldier Field. Very excited for that. So be sure to be on the lookout for all the good stuff coming from there. Q, quickly, score prediction. What do you got for us?
Let's see. So I'm going to say Bears 15.
Oh, such an ugly number. Such an ugly
Five
number.
field goals, baby. 5 field goals.
Oh.
And one of them off a turnover. So you're not just getting long drives every time. At least one off a turnover. Just a fumble, like a botched punt return fumble or something. And then let's do Raiders 12.
Oh,
a touchdown, a field goal, and a safety.
And a safety. I like that. That's, you know what? You'd appreciate this, Q. This past Saturday, I called the game over at St. Xavier, my alma mater here in the Chicagoland area. At one point in the first quarter, the game was 3-2 because of a field goal and a safety. So I figured that would be something you would appreciate. But
man, I bet against the Raiders last week, and I lost the bet on a safety in the last minute. I was pissed. Like I had Patriots plus 3.5, and
man,
they ended up losing by 5 because the Raiders forced a safety in the last minute of the game. Ugh.
That's a bad beat. That hurts. That really hurts. I feel it for you, man. It's a tough way to go out. Q, I'm gonna give a couple more points. I think somehow, some way, we saw the Bears do this against the Texans last year, where they magically got enough points. I think we're going to have a 20-17 ball game. And I think the Bears win. I do. I'm going to be optimistic for once in my life as a Bears fan that they're going to put up 20 points and win this game. And when they don't, then everybody can laugh and point at me, and that's totally fine. But at least for now, 20-17 is my prediction. For
one thing that's worth noting there, I mean, I think when Justin Fields exited the game this week, you saw a lot of people step up. You saw Velus Jones start stepping up on his returns. You saw the defense start stepping their game up. Like it was almost like the crutch of Fields was gone, and they were like, we need to get our stuff together, and they played really well.
Yeah, agreed. And we saw them start using DJ more. Maybe that'll be a common theme this coming Sunday as well. It'll be interesting to see. A lot to come up here. And again, tune in with us next week. As always, follow along on Sunday during the game. And we will see you guys a week from tonight. Before we get out of here, Q, want to remind everybody Bears on Tap, one of 2 official Bears podcasts here covering the Chicago Bears at the On Tap Sports Network. Follow us at Bears on Tap on the socials. Follow our friends over at the Bears Nation Bears Nation podcast. They're at Bears Nation Pod on the socials. Follow us as well. I am at Loose on Tap, at Butkus Stats, the best account, or one of the best accounts. I got to give some shout out to our friend Robert Schmitz, also one of my favorite Twitter accounts. You two are like my favorite Twitter accounts in Bears fandom. So it's you two guys that I follow, and our friend Mr. Juice on Tap as well, who will be back with us hopefully next week. We miss Juice, and we'd like to have him back. You guys know the drill. You can find everything. Hawks, Blackhawks, or they're the same team. Hawks, Bulls, pardon me. Cubs, Sox, you know the drill. We got it all. OnTapSportsNet.com, at OnTapSportsNet on social media. On Tap Sports Network. Go and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Q, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Crazy bummer of a loss on Sunday. A lot to talk about as a result of it, of what the future state of this franchise looks like. And we get a glimpse into that window here in week 7 coming up against the Las Vegas Raiders at Soldier Field. Until next time, we'll get out of here with a good old bear down.
Bear down.